They'd walk into a scene, deliver a single line, and bring the whole studio audience to its knees. Lenny and Squiggy weren't ordinary supporting characters, they were pure comic disruption in leather jackets, capable of hijacking any moment they appeared in. But few people know how these two unknown comedians ended up on Laverne and Shirley in the first place, or why Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall stayed quiet for so long about what actually went on behind the scenes. The real story involves a living room party, a hasty rewrite of the characters, and moments far too chaotic for network television. This is how the duo who reshaped sitcom comedy actually came together. Long before the catchphrase, the leather jackets, or that unmistakable greeting that would eventually bring studio audiences to their feet, Lenny and Squiggy were just two friends riffing at a house party. Decades later, both Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall still lit up remembering that night. The whole thing began casually, in Penny Marshall's own living room. It wasn't a tryout of any kind, just a relaxed evening among friends, the kind of gathering Penny and her husband at the time, Rob Reiner, hosted often. Writers, actors, and comedians would drop by, and on this particular night two guests stood out, David Lander and Michael McKean. Penny already knew the pair from their work with The Credibility Gap, a satirical sketch and music group that had earned a devoted following throughout the 1970s. Their sharp improvisational instincts made them impossible to forget. And that night, in the middle of ordinary conversation, something shifted. Lander and McKean slipped effortlessly into two exaggerated, oddball alter egos right there among the guests. According to Penny, they didn't need any prompting. The transformation happened almost instantly, and the whole room dissolved into laughter. Cindy remembered the pair having an infectious rhythm together, as if they'd been performing as a team for years. Penny didn't need to see a script to recognize what she was watching. Raw comedic chemistry, built on timing, interruption, and unpredictability. The moment couldn't have come at a better time. Laverne and Shirley was still finding its footing as a series about two working-class friends trying to build independent lives. The show leaned on the bond between Cindy and Penny's characters, but producer Gary Marshall, Penny's brother, wanted something extra. Characters who could crash into a scene, stir up trouble, and leave the audience gasping for breath. So Penny made the case to her brother that these two performers deserved a look. The very next day, Lander and McKean were called in. No formal audition, just an open invitation to show what they could do. And once they stepped onto the soundstage, the living room magic repeated itself. They commanded the room the same way they had among friends, and the laughter never let up. What began as an unscripted bit at a party quietly became one of television's more unlikely origin stories. It wasn't chance so much as a rare alignment of instinct and timing. Plenty of people made Penny laugh, but almost none of them had the ability to make an entire room lose it instantly, and that's exactly what Lander and McKean had. It wasn't a casting call or a writer's room pitch that launched Lenny and Squiggy. It was a crowded Los Angeles living room, where two friends slipped into character on a whim and ended up changing the trajectory of the show. When Laverne and Shirley was brand new, nobody could have predicted that two minor characters, originally conceived as Lenny and Anthony, would become genuine television icons. The idea was straightforward enough. Two neighborhood guys even more broke and awkward than the show's leads, guaranteed instant laughs. But before the world ever met Squiggy, a quiet decision behind the scenes reshaped who the characters would be. Penny Marshall later revealed that the second character wasn't originally meant to be Squiggy at all. He was Anthony, an Italian neighborhood guy paired with Lenny for what was intended as a single guest appearance. The trouble was that the show already had plenty of Italian characters, between Phil Foster's and Eddie Mecca's roles and the overall flavor of the series. Something different was needed. So the writers scrapped Anthony and created Andrew Squiggy Squigman instead. Same duo, entirely new identity. With that single change, Squiggy's background became vague, somewhere between German and Eastern European depending on the episode. What mattered wasn't nationality, though. It was the sound of the name itself. Squiggy was odd, punchy, and instantly memorable, pairing perfectly with the more ordinary Lenny. That shift wasn't just cosmetic. It freed the characters from any specific ethnic or neighborhood context and let them become something broader and stranger, pure, lovable chaos. Once the name changed, Penny said, everything about the characters clicked into place. The accents, the posture, the strange cadences of speech. Lenny's full name, Lenny Kosnowski, was engineered for laughs before he even opened his mouth. Penny once joked that the surname sounded like a nonsensical cry for help, a fitting summary of the absurd energy the characters carried. Cindy considered the rename a turning point. Once they became Lenny and Squiggy, audiences knew trouble was coming the instant those names were mentioned. The change also gave the writers far more creative freedom. The characters no longer needed a specific reason to show up in a scene. They could simply appear as neighbors, co-workers, or nuisances, deliver a joke, and vanish. Gary Marshall, always focused on tight comic structure, recognized the value immediately. A character who enters, gets the laugh, and exits was, in his words, pure gold. Lenny and Squiggy became the show's release valve, the friends nobody quite wanted around but everyone secretly loved, because they lightened every scene they touched. Once their earliest episodes aired, Anthony was forgotten entirely, and Squiggy became a household name. A last-minute casting adjustment turned into one of the smartest creative choices in sitcom history. When Penny brought Landa and McKean to her brother Gary, she already knew they were funny. But Gary recognized something more structural, the missing piece in what he saw as the show's comic architecture. To him, a great sitcom worked like a social equation, built on contrast, characters striving to climb higher, and characters below them serving as a reminder that things could always be worse. Laverne and Shirley were dreamers trying to escape the grind of a Milwaukee brewery, sympathetic, funny, relatable underdogs. But even underdogs need someone louder and messier to look down on. That was the role Lenny and Squiggy were built to fill. As Gary reportedly put it, every show needs someone positioned lower on the ladder. This wasn't an insult to the characters, it was deliberate design. Every straight character needs a wild card nearby, and every emotional beat benefits from an outlet valve of chaos. Lenny and Squiggy existed to burst the tension whenever a scene grew too heavy, which is why their appearances were kept short, sharp, and explosive by design. Cindy once compared Gary's sense of comic timing to mathematics. He understood exactly how long to let a joke breathe before moving on. With Lenny and Squiggy, that precision meant audiences always knew that whenever the door opened for those two, laughter was guaranteed. Gary's formula wasn't only about pacing, it was about proportion. Laverne and Shirley were flawed, believable people, so the characters positioned beneath them needed to be absurd enough that the leads would look composed by comparison. Lenny and Squiggy's disorder, oddly, made the two women look more grounded and heroic. That balance gave the show its distinctive identity, blending female-led storytelling with broad physical comedy. Without Lenny and Squiggy, the series risked becoming a fairly ordinary story about two roommates trying to get by. With them, it became something stranger and more memorable, a small comic ecosystem of dreamers and disruptors. McKean later reflected that their characters existed to make everyone else look sane by comparison, and that they embraced that role fully. Some television moments are recognizable by sound alone. For Laverne and Shirley, it was the creak of a door followed by a single word, hello. No matter how serious or emotional the preceding scene had been, that entrance flipped the energy of the room instantly. Nobody executed that shift better than Landa and McKean. Gary Marshall demanded relentless timing from his cast, and the show moved at a brisk pace. But with Lenny and Squiggy, it went beyond rehearsed timing into pure instinct. They didn't simply enter scenes, they arrived. What started as basic stage direction evolved into an anticipated ritual. Penny later recalled that audiences began laughing the instant the door creaked, because they already knew what was coming. The mechanics were simple but exact. Lenny standing tall with a goofy grin, Squiggy barreling in with a stiff, exaggerated stride and a nasally voice. Every pause was deliberate, building tension before the payoff. Cindy described their timing as controlled chaos, an entrance that looked accidental but was, in reality, closely engineered. Their choreography was rehearsed down to the smallest detail, where they stood, how they leaned, how long a stare lasted before breaking. It was slapstick precision dressed up as spontaneity. But technique alone didn't explain their appeal. Audiences loved that Lenny and Squiggy had no business barging into scenes, yet did so anyway, interrupting romantic or emotional moments and turning them into laughs. Years later, McKean admitted that he and Landa sometimes played directly with the audience's rhythm, opening the door and simply standing there in silence, letting the crowd's own laughter do the work. That single word, hello, became a masterclass in comic timing, capable of resetting the emotional temperature of an entire scene. For Cindy and Penny, those entrances were both a delight and a professional challenge, since staying in character while Lenny and Squiggy took over a scene required real discipline. Penny once joked that they deserved hazard pay just for not